from NYU in 2003. I'm originally from West Africa.
Hi, I'm Mindy. I graduated from NYU in 2009. Since then, I worked in outpatient substance abuse, and I worked in outpatient mental health for a while. I earned my LCSW, and I've been working in corporate defender services for a little over 2.5 years now. We serve the indigent population, so people that can't afford representation are represented by either us or legal aiders in what's called the 18B panel. I'm helping to build out a mental health unit within Brooklyn Defender Services, so we're specifically serving within that unit clients that suffer from different varieties of mental illnesses and helping them avoid the formal prosecution or get treatment instead of jail time, essentially. And then also in private practice on the side, just part-time in the evenings.
I'm Casey. I graduated from NYU in 2005. I'm currently the director of Brooklyn Homeless Outreach. There's a lot of other organization titles in there, but and I have over the years specialized primarily in working with the homeless, also working with people with mental illness and people with HIV. I've worked with 7PD treatment programs and supported housing programs, and I've been with Homeless Outreach in different capacities since 2007. I'm originally from Texas, so it's really terribly cool.
Okay, so the panel today, we're going to focus on social work professionalism as well as with special attention to social justice specifically. So I'll pose questions, and then at the end, time permitting, we can open the floor for more questions. So the first question, what do you think the common perception of social justice is?
I thought a lot about it. At first I read the question as what was my definition of social justice, and I thought about it in a different way. But I think that it depends on what the person's perspective of the world is, and if they're more conservative personally see us all as bleeding hearts and in a more negative light of we're enabling people to not work for themselves and to not do for themselves. But if you see it as more, everyone needs a hand sometimes, then you're going to see it as, seeking justice for everyone, seeking equality, seeking, the basics of life, housing, food, shelter, clothing, care, love, joy, all that stuff.
I had a similar take. I had to send a question just asking, how do you want us to approach this? Because from my perspective, I look at it from myself as an individual, what does it mean to me? Which means helping those that are, marginalized to gain their voice and have a voice to advocate for themselves and for their families. And then when you look at it from the political perspective, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, if you're a Republican, you would think the rich people get to move on and then the money trickle down. If you're on the other side of it, then you look at it that we need to be able to support each other to grow from there. And then if you look at it from the New York City, which is a very complex city, you're kind of looking at it in terms of poverty, in terms of housing, in terms of mental illness, which is composition of the families that I work with. So depending on how you look at it, I think it's just the idea of thinking about how can you support each other to move forward, and then sharing that idea with other people so you have a mass movement in terms of making change.
Yeah, similar to both of my colleagues. I think social justice from a social work perspective, at least, is everybody being given the same tools and opportunities to forward themselves in the world. And then everybody in the world, or in our society, being judged by the same rule book. Unfortunately, in my experience, especially in the criminal justice system, that's not been the case. I'm sure everyone's seen that in the media, especially, and with a lot of the current events going on. There seems to be an expectation for social justice from our society that people are supposed to pick themselves up by the bootstraps and kind of make it happen. But I think a true social justice perspective is giving everybody the tools that they need to be successful. Unfortunately, especially in New York City, there's such a huge separation between people that have and people that don't, and there seems to be less and less gray area. So I think our job as social workers is to gray out everybody a little bit and make sure everyone gets the basic foundation that they need.
So for students who are interested in working specifically with social justice, what experiences, courses, training, and stuff do you guys recommend?
I personally have not taken a course on social justice. So what I've learned over the years is in terms of what I do, I learn from my supervisors, how can I make a change? My frustration has always been, sitting in an office and doing critical work. Because when I came to NYU, I'm from Africa, and the way we look at, we are a communal society, the way we look at things is more in a social justice sense, because one person has something in the village, then everybody shares it. When somebody has something in the family, everybody shares it. So my experience at NYU was kind of flipped backwards. Because when I came here, most of the courses that I took were mostly based on clinical courses. And everybody that came to teach me owned a private practice. So I had to go to my professor. I said, I think I'm wasting my time here because it doesn't resonate for me. But luckily, during my second year here, I went to the Alumni Institute where they train using the family systems. So whatever I was learning here began to make sense for me. So I would say, the way I have learned in terms of being a social justice participant and movement member has been from the Alumni Institute, because it opened, a lot of doors for me to look at things differently. And how do you do a grassroots? How do you start a grassroots movement? How do you give the families a voice to advocate for themselves? How do you outreach and partner with other agencies? And then in terms of training at the Center for Family, now we have an agency standing committee for the move to end violence, which is a national organization. So we're working internally to see how we can bring other social service organizations together to then have that conversation ongoing.
I think the basic education at NYU, I did the 2-year program, and I think it gave me a pretty solid foundation to understand the basics and some of the inner workings. Obviously, it's a very clinical program, and I think a lot of people here or went to NYU for that reason. But in terms of post-graduation, my biggest recommendation is to look into free trainings at CUCS. They have a whole justice-informed practice, and they do free trainings, which you can get CEUs for, which we now need for our licensure. And they do all kinds of panels, they do trainings, they do full-day trainings, they do certificate programs that are free. And that's something that I've attended as a panelist, and also something that I've attended just for my professional continuation. So I think staying connected to these kind of services, they do webinars. I did one just last week on interactive journaling that people can do in the jails. Like all of these really great programs that you can do to continue learning about what's going on right now in terms of social justice instead of just relying on stuff that you can carry through. So I think continuing education is a really important piece.
For me, I came to NYU not really understanding that all social workers weren't like social workers. And so I didn't really understand what I was getting into. It took me a little while to settle into understanding what I could do with my education. I did stick it out and finish the 2 years, though it was really a struggle for me the whole time. And I didn't want to be a clinician, I didn't want to be a therapist, and that was kind of presented to me as what I was going to have to do as an NYU educated social worker. And so I think for me, my journey has been all about understanding, yes, that's the education I have, but how can I use that in the work that I actually want to do? And I started out, I worked at the Bellevue Hospital HIV clinic. Hardcore stuff. I loved it though, it was amazing. And in every day you kind of, you talk to a person and you're able to kind of sort through, okay, this is the stuff that I know, this is the stuff this person's telling me, how do I mesh these two things together? And I worked from there, I actually went to CUCS, which is talking about the trainings, the curriculum. And I worked in one of their supportive housing programs. And even there, I was working directly, doing direct service with people with mental illness. They were all formerly homeless. It was a transitional residence, which was supposed to be between 6 months and 2 years, but most of them stayed well past that 2-year period. And I feel like for me, the way I work is just I need kind of on the job understanding of things. I have to kind of learn from people. And so, I worked with people that have been there's still people I remember because they were some of the more challenging people I've ever worked with, understanding how it is to be, poor and African American from New York City and have schizophrenia. or have a bipolar disorder and have children and who are not with you, and just the very many aspects of their lives that I personally had not experienced, but was expected to help guide them through. And so I'm listening to them, hearing what they had been through, and how I could help them to make things better. And I always feel like I left that place better than I found it. I'm a Girl Scout, that's my philosophy for life. And so, I have clients there, and it's very fulfilling to know. Like, I've worked with some of the people I worked with there since I've left, and they've told me that those people still remember me. They still remember I was the person that brought them out, of whatever it was they were going through in that moment. And from there, I went to, I worked actually for homeless outreach part-time. I was on the overnight shift doing weekends, and it was a second job for me, because as many people find out, it's very expensive to go somewhere. And and I learned there, I felt very strongly, and it really changed my whole perspective on the work I could do, is because it was just so hands-on, and it's so in the moment, and it's so real every moment of the day. And especially on the overnight shift, you're getting all of the crises. Right now, we're in what we call a code blue, constant, patrolling of the streets to make sure that people aren't dying. It's really, straight up, cut and dry stuff. And from there, I was working part-time there, and I got a full-time job at Community Access, which is a housing agency, but they kind of go for a different tilt. They look at it through, like, mental illness through the lens of recovery. And not really pushing people into a medical model of treatment for mental illness, but allowing them to decide where they want to go, and allowing them to decide if they want to take medication, but also being really kind of harm reduction oriented and educating them about the effects. If you don't take medication, this is what you can look forward to, or if you do, this is what, the bad parts, but also the good parts of what you can look forward to. And I felt really strongly, like, working there, I walked away with an understanding of, like, from my CUCS education work, they are very clinical, they're very medical model, so kind of understanding that, and then going into community access and understanding their perspective, I feel like I have a good understanding of both, and I have been able to match them in my work over the years after I left there. And then I came back to homeless outreach full time, and I worked the overnight shift, which is really hard. I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved into be the clinical coordinator for the Brooklyn case management team, and that is, once we've confirmed that a person is chronically street homeless, we're able to provide them with case management services, the ultimate goal being to provide permanent housing assistance. I'm sorry, I'm talking for so long. But we do everything for them. I was talking to Mindy. We use her services quite a bit because we have a lot of people who are, criminal justice involved and that also are mentally ill, and so helping them to not get arrested and not put in Rikers, because that, if you've ever been to that unit, it's terrible, and they don't do anything for people. They just stay there forever, and they're not getting their medication, and they're not being cared for the way they should. And so I think, for me, where I've landed and where I see myself going in homeless outreach, it's everything. Like, I see everything at my job, and I feel like, I have a lot of my case managers that work for me, a lot of them come straight from undergrad or thought you're volunteering or whatever, and they don't really have any experience in the field. It's a perfect place to go to know what you want to do, because we really see every problem possible, and you can kind of choose where you want to hone in. But for me, it's been just about everything. I like the day-to-day is different every single day. I engage with communities. I do hospital education workshops, and I go to libraries and senior centers and talk to the police, which is difficult. And I get to do a lot of different stuff, and I feel like my education has been that, like, interacting with other people, learning from them, and learning from the people that work for me and that I work with. And also I read a lot of books. Like, if there's something that I really am interested in, I will find resources to learn more about the issue, the history of the problem, what has been done to address it in the past, and kind of try to go from there. So it's similar.
That's why we have the So, I think you touched on a little bit the idea that culture is so ingrained in our organizations that we're working for. So, in your job searches, what strategies did you employ to make sure that the culture of the organization was a good fit for you?
my first job, the culture was not a good fit. But unfortunately, I learned that after I started the job. I think it's important to ask about opportunities, to ask about what their view of social work is, because a lot of the different positions that there are social workers, it's not a social work-driven environment. So I think it's important that you go somewhere where social work is respected and understood, and I think it's okay to ask about that in an interview setting. You know, how they like to utilize social workers, because I think sometimes organizations think that social workers are like glorified assistants to whoever is in charge, whether that be a psychiatrist, an attorney, whatever have you. So I think it's important to understand what the view of social work is. If you're going into like a purely clinical setting, it's probably going to be okay, but even then, I think it's just important to ask what opportunities they have, what kind of supervision you're going to get, what kind of continuing education opportunities. Some of these CEUs are really expensive if you have to go out of house to do them. So it's great when organizations want to bring in training. So if they have an opportunity to send you out to trainings or to bring trainings in-house, I think that that's something really important to ask about. But in general, also, you want to make sure that the model is in line with how you want to practice. So can you work somewhere in harm reduction, or does it need to be abstinence only if you're going into the substance abuse field? You just want to make sure that you want to practice how they practice, because the agency itself is likely not going to change their philosophy, and it's their philosophy to have, I suppose. There's always room for tweaking, but I think you're setting yourself up to fail if you're going into a place where their model does not match yours.
Yeah, my experience has been quite interesting. I started at the Family Center Inc. It's an agency that works with people who are infected and affected by HIV and AIDS. And given that I was trained at the Ackerman Institute, they embrace the family model. So we'll work with, if we have a client who was HIV positive, we'll work with the whole family, which means we'll do home visits and do therapy in the homes. They will come to us individually in the office. We're very involved. So the agency philosophy was what, drew me there, because of the family model, which was, the highlight of my own education and training. And that was very good. And then after that, I went to Bronxworks. I worked with the team program, which wasn't very accommodating. It was like you just mentioned having to file papers and put numbers together to crunch them to send to the city for funding. So the real work wasn't really happening, and that was why I went there. So I left from there, and then I worked with the parent and parenting teams, pregnant and parenting teams within Woodhouse, which was very enriching, because most of the kids are from foster care, and the time that I was there, which was like a couple of years back, maybe 3.5 years ago, the foster care model was, the case managers and social workers that I supervised, their understanding of the work was that they had to work with the pregnant teens and prevent them from seeing their parents because they're in foster care. So then I reintroduced the family model. I said, okay, they are in foster care, but it doesn't mean that the parental rights are terminated. So we need to do more outreach to the parents to get to talk to them, because when they start having those babies that they're carrying, they're going to want to connect with family members. So eventually we started doing a lot of that. So you're going to find agencies where it's a model that fits what you want to do. And then you're going to find other agencies that it's not that model, but then you have to find your way to kind of introduce what is it that you can bring to enrich the work. And you have to, be able to have a good supervisor and talk to them in a way that they hear you. Because sometimes if you have a supervisor that doesn't understand the thinking from where you're coming, they're not going to buy into whatever you're presenting. So just kind of keeping that in mind also. And then in terms of job search, network. Yeah, I had a best friend that I went to NYU. We met here and we stayed very good friends. So every time that she would find a job that she knew, was a good fit for me, she would let me know. So she had a habit of going somewhere and then dragging me along. So yeah, she's from Korea, and we've stayed very good friends. So just kind of maintaining that network is very helpful also, because you can never know what everything that is out there. So you have to be able to stay connected.
That's very good advice. I got dragged to my second job from a friend as well. it's great also because, right, certain jobs you might not see posted, but if you have an in there and you maintain connections, I'm still close with a lot of people that I went to NYU with and people from internships that I interacted with from my first job, still close with a lot of those folks too. So even if it's just every month, every couple of months touching base, it's nice because you have your own network that way of people that you trust and know you and know what you're capable of. So it's good to have that in, I think.
I think for me, I mean, the job search part, you know, at the beginning, you're kind of looking online, you're looking at idealists, which is the government thing for social justice sort of stuff. But also, you know, using the people that you know and your internships, if you have good internships, using those, using the people that you meet there who may have worked somewhere else, who can see what you are looking to do and can kind of direct you toward those agencies. I think, you know, for me, I have had a group of different jobs because I was looking for a good fit. You know, my perspective on what I really wanted to do was not typical. You know, I come from I wanted to be of service to people. I wanted to be very like face-to-face with people and not ever feel like I was kind of standing over them telling them what to do. And it's hard to find that in social work. If you're doing like case management type services, you're expected to know what's right for the person and to tell them what's right for them. And it took me a very long time to find something that didn't do that. And where I work now, I've been there since the program started in 2007 in one capacity or another. And so I've been able to shape the culture of the program and the people that we hire and kind of the way that we work with our clients. And that for me has been amazing and has led me to believe I want to stay forever because I'm really happy there and I really enjoy the work I'm doing and I feel really great about the things that we're able to do for clients and the impact that we have on their lives, but also the people that we hire. We have a lot of really young people and they've come straight from their undergrads or from volunteer years or from, you know, other jobs in other fields that are looking to do something social justice or social service oriented. And they start with us and then they go out and they get a master's in social work or a master's in urban planning or public health or public administration. And so I know that they have a good foundation. They're going out into the world and they're doing, you know, things with the heart of what we taught them at Common Ground.
So it sounds like you guys have experienced some awesome things, maybe some frustrating things. So what would you say are the most surprising things you've experienced, both good and maybe not so good, in the field?
Surprising things. Okay, I'll start with surprising things that are good. Surprising things that are good for me is just learning from my clients, the families that I work with, and, you know, being able to have a conversation with them that changes their way of thinking, and being able to have a conversation with them that they come the next day and say, oh, I remember you said this, and when this person was talking to me, this is what I thought about it. I said, oh, okay. For me, that's, you know, that's kind of like, you know, the gratification of doing the work that we do. I have a client that is, she came to us a couple of months ago. We are a Tier 2 shelter, which means that when homeless families that have experienced domestic violence go into the Tier 1 shelter, they stay there for 4 months. And then when they don't have a place to go to after those 4 months, they transition them to us. So then we have them for 15 months. So we had this young lady that just transferred to us, and she came in very volatile. There's an extreme history of trauma, sex trafficking, and you name it, she has been there. So I was having meetings with her, and then there's an ACS case, you know, the ACS worker came into my office, and I sat in the office and I listened to the two of them. It was like a back and forth kind of, you know, verbal fighting between the two of them. So I looked at them and I was like, may I interject, please? This is my office and you don't do that here. Very gentle way. And I asked him, because he was right there, I said, what's the conflict? I said, I can feel the tension. How can the two of you work when you have so much conflict? What's going on? Then the young lady was able to say, I hate her from the day that she came into my apartment. I hated her. I like my previous work. And then I asked the worker, I said, what is your sense of what is going on? Oh, she's always been like that. Never paid attention. She doesn't want to do A. She doesn't want to do B. I said, but if the two of you meet and go go at each other this way, and then there's going to be a hard to understand or hard to hear each other. So can we change the conversation, the way we're having the conversation? And then after that, the young lady stayed with me. I said, that must have been hard for you. Just that one phrase, she just burst out crying. And then she came to me, she came back to me, she said, Miss, I really don't want to talk to you because I don't know you, but I like you. You know, I will do it like. So, we have been meeting on and off, you know, when she's doing something that I keep trying to say, remember, you know, because one of the challenges for the families that we work with is that they're very young, they're in their 20s, and they come from very traumatic backgrounds, you know, there's a lot of dysfunction. So they don't know how to raise the kids that they have. So the part of the work is parenting, you know, just kind of sitting with them and say, this is how you talk to a child. This is how you do to a child. When the child is crying, this is what you do. So she comes into the office. I said, you know, this is how you have to take care of the child. And then remember, I have to also report to ACS when they call me when they're going to court. You want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do so when they take your paperwork to court, it looks good. So she comes to me, she said, Miss, I really don't like you, but you look nice. So I said, okay, can we talk about the parenting, how is it going? So when I do those reports to ACS, then she comes back to me, why? You're a horrible person. That's the challenge. You are the worst person. All you want to do is have my child taken away. You know, for me that's painful to sit through, but you know, it's part of my job. It's part of what I do. So I sit through with her, and then I ask, okay, what is the part that I've done that is so horrible? She will say, oh, you reported this to them. I said, well, that's part of the work that I need to do here. That's part of what I am here to do. So we kind of work through it. The last time that we had a meeting, it was very intense, and she walked out of the meeting. So I'm walking home in the evening, I'm all done, you know, I'm checking my text, and she walked by me about, you know, a couple of feet down. Good night, Margaret. I turned around and said, is that you? I said, come on, you're not just going to throw good night at me. So I started walking towards her, and she walked towards me. So I said, how was your day? It was good. I got this. I went to my program. This is what I did. At the end of the conversation, she gave me a hug. Yeah, I was like, very fulfilled. So that has been my experience, just learning from them, learning from them how to help them move from point A to point B, or learning from them to help them stay where they want to stay. Just giving them the information so that they can inform decisions.
I am surprised by things every single day of my job, both good and bad. I get surprised at how kind people can be, both clients and people that I interact with professionally. I get surprised at certain offers that I get from judges that I never would have thought would get like an alternative to incarceration offer, and we all just kind of stand there at the bench like, now let's get it right, and like, how did this just happen? And then I'm surprised at how cruel the system can really be, and how angered I can get by the really overt injustices that I think we see as social workers. Like, I get surprised at myself that I still get angry at all of that, but I don't think that that's a good thing, because I think if you stop getting angry, then you're not caring as much. So for me, I get surprised by the resilience of my clients, like people that have done 25 years upstate, somehow get picked up for some like student misdemeanor, and they handle it so beautifully sometimes. So there's such strength in our clients that I think, you know, it's important to remember not to treat clients with kid gloves in any sense. It's important to be sensitive to where they're at, but I mean, I feel like it's drilled into all of our heads from NYU, like, you meet the client where they're at. Like, really though, that is one of the things that I take with me every day, is being able to empower, coming from a strengths-based perspective, and I'm always surprised at how effective that is and how that helps me work with really difficult clients. Clients that I might not have wanted to work with or chosen to work with. That's part of the work that I do, is we're assigned clients based on their need, we don't pick and choose and cherry pick who we like to work with. So there are certain populations that I never set out to work with that I've ended up enjoying. Like, I really enjoy a manslaughter case now because there's so much going on. I really enjoy people that have had serious incarceration histories. Like, several upstate bids, people who come home to nothing, people who come home to families and like rebuild a life. I had a client recently who, when he was 17 years old, was convicted of manslaughter. He did 25 years at state. 25 years, never got a violation. He made his first parole boards, he got released, he completed parole, and then picked up a case. And it was a really stupid case. Without getting into like a whole long-winded story about it, it was some kind of like attempted assault, like a very low-level felony, but something that he was facing time on. He was facing another 2 years upstate. He had come home, he didn't have kids, but he got married, he got a full-time job, he's working for the elderly in the Upper West Side. He takes care of his sick mother in West Virginia. He's close to his siblings again. He had several losses by the time that he was released on parole. And he was just so devastated by picking up this case. I did what's called a pre-pleading memorandum for him, which is basically it's writing out a psychosocial with a huge piece of mitigation based on what he's experienced in his life. And we were able to get him a non-jail sentence. We got him on probation. He's successfully on it. About a month later, I got this weird little package delivered to the office. His wife, who was like super involved in the case, and we got all these character letters. We had like I've never seen anything like it before. It was like a stack of letters from people in his life this thick. Just letters, people talking about his character and how amazing he is, despite that he did 25 years in an upstate prison. And she works for a bank, and it was like this whole bag of like this bank stuff, just like, you know, little freebies that you get. There were like wine charms. But there was a little note in there, and I called her to say thank you, and they were just so appreciative and so happy that we were able to work something out and that he wasn't judged by his rap sheet, that because we were able to successfully intervene and form some good advocacy, we were able to keep him in the community so he didn't have to give up everything he had worked so hard to rebuild in his life. And that was such a surprising feat. He's like one of my favorite clients. But if you looked at him on paper, you would not have wanted to work with him probably, because he has some really serious cases in his past. So that for me was like a very positive, a surprisingly positive experience.
I mean, I think that the thing that's been most challenging that I didn't expect was the, at times, adversarial attitude between social workers and between colleagues. That was why at Bellevue I had a woman that I shared an office with who was a bully, and she made me look miserable because I didn't stand down, and you know, I didn't have the support that I needed to battle with her, and so I ended up leaving. I think that if I was there, I could definitely made more, but I wasn't able at that moment in my life to really sort through all of that. And you know, I've had rumbles with people at the welfare office where I almost got kicked out because my client and I would go in there, and like one day he'd be like at 11, and the next day I'd have to be at 11. Like we would trade off days, almost getting kicked out because it's so frustrating. It's just epically frustrating that you're walking in there and these people are being paid to help people, being paid to provide a service, and their relationship with your clients is so adversarial, and your job is to advocate for them. So you go in there trying to make an alliance and like work with these people, and then you end up like almost getting kicked out of the building. So that, I think, for me has been one of the greatest challenges, is like walking into a room and kind of having to figure out like who's with you and who you're going to have to battle with. I've battled with the police, but I've also had good nights with the police. Like it's really, and I think people are surprised with me. I'm from Texas. I say y'all a lot. Like I'm pretty sweet on the outside, but I can rumble, and people don't know that, and so it's good. But also this what you were saying about the clients that you would not expect to love are the ones that are my favorites. The clients that I carry with me years and years after they're done with my program are the ones. I had a woman. She was in her probably mid-40s. Had been homeless for most of her life and had a really traumatic history. Was involved in sex work. Was a heroin addict. Like really, really serious stuff. And it was really difficult, but in the end, she's the most honest person I've ever met in my life. And the conversations I had with her, you always know where you stand with her. You always know how she feels about you. You always know what she expects from you. You always know what she needs from you. And And she and I worked well together, and she's been in housing for 2 years, and she's really successful, she's doing really well, and the building loves her, because the same reasons that I love her. And I've had other clients. I work with a lot of very severely mentally ill people, and coming from here where I did not want to do clinical work, I've become the person that people go to for people with severe schizophrenia or with severe bipolar disorder, because those are the people that I understand, and I'm able to, to navigate that system with them and to talk them through things. And again, some of my favorite people that I've worked with over the years, it's just, I think with my particular population, especially coming from the street, and we are moving them into supportive housing, but permanent housing most of the time, you see just these profound changes in people's lives, people that for years, literally sometimes years, we saw every single day, and we said, hey, Mr. So-and-so, how you doing? Do you want to go inside tonight? And they said no for 2 years. And then one day you walk in, they're like, fine, leave me alone. And they go inside, and they work with you, and they get an apartment, and they're doing so well. And we do have some losses. We have people, the homeless, their life expectancies are not as long as people who are not homeless. So, I've lost a good number of clients that I've been really close to, but you leave that knowing that they were loved and they were cared for all the ways that you knew them, and you provided them with something they didn't have. You provided them with a place to live, a roof over their head, regardless of how, luxurious it is. Like, a roof is a roof, and a kitchen, and a bathroom, and a bed to sleep in, and all of that stuff. So it's like you have to walk into, I think, appreciating the impact that you have.
Switching gears a little bit, what professional organizations are you guys a part of, if any, and do you think that they've helped grow your professional development or helped facilitate professional growth?
Yeah, I think so. I am a part of the National Association of Social Workers, and I would say I haven't gained much from them, but every now and then they kind of put out something that makes sense. I'm also a part of the Alumni Association at the Alumni Institute, because we had trained there as they called us diversity group, like students of color. That was that program. They still have it, so I'm part of that board. And then I'm also part of the NYU Alumni, which it has been very helpful for me, because I get to do most of the trainings here. I'm in the mailing list, so they send me the emails, and I get to do most of the workshops that come up here. And then I'm also a part of the grandparent task force in New York City. When I worked at the family center, I was running the group of grandparents that were then raising their grandchildren, because the children were either incarcerated or they were there from HIV. So I'm part of that coalition also. And then I'm part of the Move to End Violence, which is a Nova Foundation national organization. And it's been very helpful, because you get to be in the loop of things and gain a lot of information.
I'm also an NASW member. I'd say, again, every once in a while some group comes up. Most recently, they do online webinars that are free to members that, again, you can get CEUs from. They also have a fairly decent job search engine thing, if you can find it on a very confusing website of the NASW New York City chapter. It's a little difficult to navigate, but they do also give you, you get like newsletters and publications, and they can give you discounts on books that are too expensive for social workers to afford. So all those kind of things are really helpful. They can give you subscriptions to different journals that you might be interested in. They do have it broken up to special interest groups as well. So if you are more interested in going to social justice or criminal justice route, they have a special practice group for that. They have a specialized clinical thing. So that has been helpful. I also, as of yesterday, was enrolled in a public defense association of sorts. I will get you the real name for it if you want. It's in my email somewhere, but it was literally just yesterday, so I can't speak to the benefits or anything of it. But yeah, NASW can be helpful if you are patient.
I'm not really remembering anything. My program is funded by the Criminal Services for the State. So I'm on several task forces for mayor's task force on homelessness, which is like broken into like a clinical task force where we put together like the most difficult street homeless clients that we're working at the start of their facilities, and Cameron's task force, and that one's been particularly challenging because you have to get the police and the sanitation and the Department of Transportation and like everybody to work together. For me, more than anything, like I have my informal connections with people have been the most helpful. You know, there are very few people in the city of New York that do my job. You know, there's like the Manhattan almost outreach is a bigger group, that there's like one dude that runs that, and there's some like smaller programs, and then there's the person who runs Staten Island, the person who runs Brooklyn, the person who runs Queens, and the person who runs Bronx, so there's like 6 of us. But those people are really great. I feel like, you know, the people that you meet at your jobs, you can make your own like cohort of like-minded people. And I did that when I was in school here. You know, I had a class in my first semester with probably 2 or 3 people that I met, and then we met 2 or 3 people that were friends, and they were the people that I traveled with in school, and they're still my friends, you know, over the years. And they all do different stuff than I do, maybe I'm insane. But there's still the people that know me and the people that get what I'm trying to do, and that, you know, we can talk about different stuff and we can connect over social work things. And so I always encourage people to like make friends in school and it's really important.
I think the new school also has a very interesting program for social justice. If you want to just pull it up.
They provide a lot of really interesting talks and stuff.
Yeah, they do stuff on their mailing list.
Yeah,
I just recently went there for a GABI training, which is a attachment-based training, you know, to work with families that come from family, they work with the children and then the families.
They do a lot of stuff with like writers coming in and like public officials, and they have one now. It's about, you have it. It's about families in shelter. They did a big study that actually called me for like very, very beginning stuff to talk about the shelter system that it's about families in shelter and the impact of that on small children and the trauma and all that stuff. But they do a lot of really interesting, like it's in the School of Urban Policy and Research, I think is what it's called. And it's where they're like in PA and they're in PH and they're in PhD of public urban policy is, and they do a lot of really interesting stuff there. Kind of urban city oriented stuff.
Okay, so we'd like to open it up if anyone has any questions. Shilpa?
I have a question. So thank you, first of all, for sharing your experiences. The work that you do, I guess I can't think of a better word than heavy. I mean, it's got to take, you know, a toll on you. What do you do for self-care?
Lots of things. I think non-social work related contact is important as much as social work related contact is important. Similarly to what my colleagues have said, I have a cohort of about 5 of us from one of my jobs when I was at Catholic Charities, and we've all stayed really close, and it's almost like when we go out, it's weekly or bi-weekly, like part supervision, part venting, part therapy session, and part just like really amazing with it. Yeah, and it's like a cocktail. Doesn't hurt the situation either. But I think it's also important to remember that like this is a passion and this is a vocation and it is a job, but that there are so many other things to invest your energies into. So for me, I'm at the gym a couple times a week. Sometimes I can squeeze a yoga in there. Sometimes it's watching like Bravo reruns of HGTV. But it's just finding ways that you can relax and to consciously relax a little bit at the end of each day. And your work will never be done at the end of each day. And it'll always be there when you get back. Like for better or for worse, your work, you can always pick up where you left off. And I think reminding myself of that has always been really helpful to prevent burnout. That just don't expect to ever do it, because you can't.
I would say having good supervision is very important. You have to have a supervisor that understands the work. And I work with clients with history, a lot of history of trauma. So my supervisor is not clinician, so I get to tell him what I need from him. And this occurred because I went in one that was talking to him about a case, and then he said, oh, but remember, the client have to be the self-determinant of that. And I looked at him, then I presented another case, he made the same statement. I was like, okay, so can I come back later for supervision? And then he was like, oh, you're done already? I said, yeah, those are the 2 cases I had on my case. So I made it about time, I went into my office, I was like, I want to kill somebody. My partner is also a social worker. I think you met him last time we were there. So I called him on the phone. I was like, I'm about to strangle my supervisor. He was like, oh, what happened? So I lay out the scenario to him. I said, okay, I will go back and talk to him, but I'm so mad I can't do it now. So he was like, yeah, good idea, don't do it now. So then he said, but what would you say if you went back? So then I kind of laid it out for him. He was like, oh, very good. So why did you call me? And I said, just to vent, what do you know? So having a person that understands what you do, that's very important. I have, I have 2 daughters. My youngest one is 17, and they understand my work. So even my younger daughter, when I'm talking to her, Mom, are you social working? I said, yeah. So, just being able to, I would say, I can't really separate the work from who I am because it's part of what I am, because I'm with these women every day. So what I do is, I make it a point not to take work at home. I've intentionally determined that I will not set up a work email on my home computer, but I have a cell phone because I'm on call sometimes. So every now and then when I see it blinking, I'll check if it's important, I respond. If not, I leave it alone and I go back to my office. Then having a supervisor that can clearly understand what you do, and then having peers that you hang out with. The group that I went to the Alumni Institute with, we hang out once every year. We have a friend that lives in Long Island, so we often go there every July just to hang out and say, oh, what happened during the past year? And then when we meet at alumni associations at the Alumni, we kind of catch up with each other. Sometimes we send emails. And then my best friend that I went to school here, she's back in Korea. Sometimes like, thanks, oh, I need you. Where are you? Can you just respond to me? And then she will call me like, what we can say, okay, what's going on? So you need to have that, And I do acupuncture once a month. I have a master's in New Jersey that I go to every other month. Then I do a lot of transcendental meditation, just sitting and being able to get myself anchored and out. And then at my job, what I do is with my staff, I meet with them once every month, so that we can just kind of look at what's happening and how are they doing. And then we have a transcendental meditation once a month for 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
This is for me, but maybe more challenging for us because I live in Brooklyn and all of my clients on the street are home, and so I see them. And I'm also a cultural gardener. So, like, when the weather is like different now, I work my first day off week over 2 weeks was on Sunday. Like, I've worked every single day for the last 2 weeks probably, just because we're 24/7 when I was moving, where, I got a call at 4 o'clock this morning. So that part is very difficult when you're kind of so wrapped up. And I think that one of the challenges of kind of taking a non-traditional track of social work, like not being a clinician, not working in a clinical setting, is that you are not going to have a clinical supervisor. And so I found I have a therapist that I see who provides me with clinical supervision because I found that I needed it. For years I was like, oh,